So the process, as we understand it, is that aluminum, or that pattern would, I believe it's a vibratory pattern that coalesces into a solid, which we think of as aluminum, and we use it in all different ways. But that vibratory pattern has an affinity for silica. And so in plants, animals,
All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Michael, and I'm really excited about this conversation because this is something. Okay, so first of all, let's just say I didn't tell you this, Michael. Well, you probably don't know. You listen to some of the episodes. I'm all about the connection between science and woo, and I feel like this water conversation is like right at the intersection. So, like, this is really excites me. So, thank you so much for joining us today.
great to be here. I'm thrilled to have this conversation.
Yes, me too. And I feel like we have to start at the beginning because I am curious, first of all, to know how you stumbled upon this magical water source that you found. And we'll talk about your company, all of that. But can you just give us kind of the background of how you got interested in water and this source that you're using as the source for the water in your company?
I think the most accurate answer I can give you is that I was guided to both water and to the source. And I have been a serial entrepreneur, 11 businesses plus,
Wow.
35 years now. And at some point, someone asked me, this is a story I've told before, that during one of the successful startups, not all of which have been successful, they've all been great experiences. And somebody asked me, what's next? And I said, I don't know, but it has something to do with water. And I still, at the moment, don't know why I said that. It just sort of, that's what came out,
Yeah.
so to speak. And I didn't understand it at the time. I understand more now, and maybe we'll talk about that. But after that, a series of, you could call them coincidences, fortuitous events, serendipity, or guidance. And I prefer the latter. I was guided to this spring in southern Idaho that's in the middle of the high desert, very far from civilization. And the spring it's a hot water spring. So water comes out of the ground at about 140 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow.
And so we think also, and this is kind of one of the special features of it, that it's what's called primary water. And primary water is water that's made in the Earth's crust. That is, it's not part of an aquifer. It's not part of the hydrologic cycle, right? It doesn't have to do with evaporation and rain and so on from the oceans. And so literally, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this water has never seen the Earth's surface until it comes out of the ground, and we capture it immediately. And so even the water that you had has never been out to the dance, so to speak, the virgin dance. And there is, as a result of that, this notion of purity, which, we use that word kind of very easily, but often it has a lot of different interpretations. But here you really can talk about something that's at a level of purity that is pretty much incomparable. And I just want to add one thing so that people understand that a lot of people don't realize that water is made in the Earth's crust, and it's also made in our bodies. We do have, as a result of what's called the electron transfer mechanism, we take hydrogen that's dissociated from, say, carbohydrates or fats, and that combines with oxygen to make water and heat. And that's how we heat our bodies, certainly at night, but at all times, actually, it's part of the regulatory process. So it puts that context, as above, so below, into a great understanding. The Earth that we're doing exactly what the Earth does on some levels, and we have a couple of different ways as human beings of keeping ourselves hydrated. And by the way, for me now, that's a very controversial term, frankly, because and I have to sheepishly admit this. I've done a lot of diving in to try to understand what it means to be hydrated.
Mm-hmm.
It is not at all clear. I'll just,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that.
and
Mm-hmm.
what that mechanism is not at all clear. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway,
Mm-hmm.
there's a little background.
So how was going back to how you discovered the spring? What was the journey where you discovered like the kind of the magic behind this? Like, how did you stumble upon this and then you learned all of this that you're telling us?
So specifically, I was pretty deeply involved in water, going to water conferences all over the world and dealing with world-renowned water scientists, including a guy called Gerald Pollack at the University of Washington, who's a very good friend of mine. He wrote a book called The Fourth Phase of Water, which people should look into if they're really interested in water and what a miraculous, we'll call it molecule. I actually like to think of it more as a vibratory pattern.
Mm,
We can talk a little bit more about my view of the world, what I've come to, as opposed to electrons and protons.
mm-hmm,
A
mm-hmm.
little bit different way of thinking of what matter is made out of
Yeah,
and how energy manifests itself in our world.
yeah.
Someone said to me, I've seen this water and it's really unusual. And I can give you a visual, even though this is a podcast, and you can possibly think about a way to describe it to people. But I'll show you what this water looks like. Can you see that?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see what he's talking about.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
see the crystal?
Mm-hmm.
That's silica,
Mm-hmm.
okay, in a crystalline form. That water's been programmed to have the silica coalesce so that you can see it.
Mm.
The reason is very simply that when you understand that we have enormous control over our own health, well-being, and longevity, and that we can control our healing process by having thoughts of our intention to heal, for example, or by the way, for manifestation as well. And those thoughts, which are electrical in nature, when spoken, is a vibratory pattern, which is the analog of our thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And water, because it is a liquid crystal and it can hold that information. And people like Marcel Vogel, there's YouTube videos out there about him talking about how to encode water. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, Emoto encoded water. There's more and more people are understanding that water it is magical. It's the
Right.
source of life. Everything is water. Water is everything, but that it can be used as a transducer or a recording mechanism, if you will, really, to encode our thoughts through our voice and then drink that into our body. And that vibratory pattern, which has been recorded there, plays back to our whole system.
Mm-hmm.
Cells then are able to, let's say, take instruction from our spirit
Right.
or our consciousness.
Right.
That's how it works.
Which is totally fascinating. And it's like the Japanese researcher that did the study on, when he spoke to the ice crystals and when you spoke the kind words, how it formed into these beautiful magical patterns. And when you spoke harsh, negative, like it's the same. I mean, I think if anybody doubts what, we talk about vibration and energy and all, everybody, like it's science, right? I mean, it's proving it just with that. Yeah. So, I mean, I think just that is evidence enough that the water there's something to what you're saying. Absolutely. Well, and that was what was fascinating to me when you sent the water, and because I was showing my husband, I'm like, look in the light and look, because you can, the crystals are there. Yeah. They're suspended in the water. I mean, you can see them. And so because I want to talk about,
By the way,
mhm.
just to add something real quickly.
Yeah.
You mentioned the crystals and you can see them when you hold it up to the light. And just to finish that story about the crystals, But by the way, it's true of our normal water. When I say normal, I mean the water that doesn't have the crystals visible.
Right.
The silica is still there and it's
Hmm.
still listening,
Hmm.
right? So you can still speak to the normal water, so to speak. As well, the reason for the crystal, more than anything, is that it allows people to more easily suspend their disbelief
Mm.
that they're not just talking to water. Right? It's like if you can see something in the water, these beautiful crystals, kind of helically moving around, you can imagine a situation where you talking to it makes those crystals vibrate. And then when you drink it, that vibration is in your body. And
Right.
so you are more certain. You have more faith, if you
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
yourself to be able to do this. And of course, the more faith we have in ourselves, the more effective we are.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. No, I love that. So with the silica itself, there's a lot of health benefits to silica. And so I wanted to ask you about that and just like, because people might be asking, like, okay, so what the heck is the deal with silica? Like, why are we worried about it? What are some of the health benefits? Like, what is the benefit of having this silica rich water?
Right. So silica turns out, and by the way, let's to get a little geeky here, which I know
I
you
like
love.
to, yes, I do.
Um, Silica is actually a term that describes the molecule, if you will, called silica dioxide, right? So it's oxygens connected to silicon, which is the element in the periodic table, if one wants to look it up. And so that is, by the way, the third most, or the second most, sorry, the second most prevalent element in the Earth's crust,
Mm,
silica. Second only to oxygen,
mm.
right? And the third, aluminum.
Oh, well, look at there.
So, there's some things start to occur to you when you know that. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, it's a trace mineral that's important. It's the basis for a few things like hair, teeth, bones, our connective tissue, collagen and silicus binds to the walls of our capillaries and blood vessels and arteries and so forth to help with blood flow. It's important for wound healing. It's important for the elasticity of our skin. And a fun fact that people may not be aware of is that as we age, one of the things that happens is we lose silica content in our body. We
Mm.
also dehydrate. We also lose
Right,
water
right.
as a proportion of our volume of our body. So in old age, we are, wrinkly. We have trouble with wound healing. We have circulatory issues. Our
Mm-hmm.
hair is funky, that sort of thing. So it makes some sense that there is a connection with silica. And to your point,
Yeah.
that's the importance of it.
Yeah, yeah, that's huge. Well, and like I was telling you before we recorded, and for everybody listening, I do a lot of hair tissue mineral analysis labs, which measure minerals, but it also measures heavy metals and aluminum and mercury are two that come up the most on because
Big.
ones we're exposed to the most, right? And
Right.
aluminum, like for sure. I mean, I can't honestly, I can't tell you that I haven't had a single client that it comes up. And so silica, like you're
Yeah.
just saying, it's interesting how abundant the silica and the aluminum is, right? Silica is one of the things that helps push out the aluminum. So I love that. I love that connection there.
So the process, as we understand it, is that aluminum or that pattern would I believe it's a vibratory pattern that coalesces into a solid, which we think of as aluminum, and
Mhm.
we use it in all different ways. But that vibratory pattern has an affinity for silica. And so in plants, animals, and human, silica binds to aluminum, and in animals and humans, we excrete it by sweat,
Mhm.
right, or urination.
Right.
And so that's kind of a natural detoxification. Plants actually sequester aluminum that they absorb from the earth. They kind of bind silica around it to keep themselves from becoming, inflamed. I mean, that's
Mm.
effectively what aluminum does is we have an inflammatory response to it.
Right.
And of course, if we collect too much, then we get this chronic inflammatory condition, sometimes referred to as Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one. Yeah. I love that connection there. It's so interesting about the plants. So when you're looking at, because you're backing up a little bit, you were talking about going to all these water conferences and stuff. So because I would love to talk about just like quality of the water that we're drinking it. Because like, I mean, not all water is created equal. I know you talk about this. So I guess just your thoughts on that and just what you want to speak to as far as like what we should be looking for, what should we be doing to just ensure that we are getting, even if we're not drinking your water all the time, from this spring, like what are we looking at?
Well, so this goes back to this notion of vibration. And, for those people that think vibration is woo, they should consult Nikola Tesla, who famously said, as you know, that if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Totally.
Remember, frequency is just an expression of how many vibrations per second.
Right.
That's the relationship there. So from my perspective, water, as I mentioned earlier, I consider it to be a recording medium. And I actually consider everything to come out of water. So believe it or not, I really think that what we're going to find in the next, I don't know, decade, maybe even sooner than that, is that we can make anything from water. And that's a pretty bold statement, but that we can make anything from water, that everything comes out of water. And so if you think about water as this recording medium, like a tape back in the old days, or some kind of a medium to record on, like a VHS tape or whatever, that it's listening all the time. And so it records whatever environment it is in. So think about municipal water, for example. What happens to municipal water? It's in a pretty chaotic environment. And it's being subjected to chemicals, which again have their own vibratory patterns.
Right.
And so you've got this water that comes into your home. And again, nothing against, municipal water, but what I like to say is that it probably won't kill you, but it certainly won't make you thrive.
Right, exactly.
Because of what it brings along, right? The baggage, if you will, from the journey that it's been on. And, I think people can relate to this. If you go into a room that's really chaotic, you come out of that room and you're vibrating way it's chaotic. Go into a sound healing meditative situation, you come out in a very harmonic way.
Yes.
And I think the water's no different than that. And so, I would say to people that probably drinking water from a spring, and of course the Europeans have known this for some time, right? If you go to Europe, there's a lot of bottled water. And of course, we're all conscious of the impact on the environment, and as I am as well. But at the same time, I'm very conscious about my own health and well-being. So while I wish that there was a spring in everybody's backyard that we could just tap into, and as in a lot of places I've been to in Italy, where they bring their bottles to the local, tap where it's coming right off the mouth.
That was one of the coolest things in Rome. I was like, wait, this water comes from where? Like it was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you go out in the country, and the same thing's true in France as well, in other places, I know Bulgaria, for example, is a big country that has really beautiful waters. And I think great waters exist all over the place.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, you have to really seek those out. And I personally think, this is true, by the way, that the first most important thing for us to live is air. Right. We can only go 4 or 5 minutes without air.
Right.
Water, we can only go about 3 days without, and food for quite a long time, sometimes completely, right, in the case of barbarians. But so water's really important for us. And so, to kind of answer your question, I just suggest to people that they find a water that is as untouched as possible, and so that it doesn't bring along a lot of this baggage. Now, people ask me a lot about filters because,
Right.
we're all so focused on, oh, there's all this bad stuff around and we just
Right.
have to clear it out, right?
Mhm.
And so reverse osmosis has been, a big topic in terms of filtration. I'm not going to say it's bad because it's got its approach, but it
Mhm.
basically takes everything out of the water,
Right.
right?
Right.
And also, I think in that process, subjects the water to some trauma, if
True.
you will.
Mhm.
So, at least when I taste um, reverse osmosis water, it feels traumatized to me.
Mhm.
I don't want to say it's dead because it's not, but it feels wounded
Mhm.
in a
Mhm.
certain way. So
Mhm.
I, I, and I have to admit, I used to have an RO system under my sink and so forth, and I've obviously stopped using that. I do have a whole house filter
Yeah.
that it oxygenates the water. I think that's
Mhm.
another thing that's pretty important is, oxygenated water is a good thing to bathe in
Mhm.
and so forth. So I've kind of tiptoed around the issue of what people should do in terms of drinking water, but at least to say that maybe filtered water from your home is not, no matter what the filter is, maybe it's
Mhm.
not the ideal situation.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like you said, I mean, I think if you can find a source that's the most untouched, like I think that's a good way to say it. Because I mean, obviously, there are things in the water that are not ideal, like in like tap water, right? So I think, there's something to be said there of we want to get rid of the
Sure.
chemicals and all that. But I think to your point, like understanding, because I think because people have asked me that before too, like if they're going to, the grocery store or whatever, and they want to get water, like, there's filtered water, then there's spring water, and then there's this water and there's that water. But I know I've read articles and stuff talking kind of actually kind of what you're saying is like the spring water from the springs. It's like the water that's hasn't been treated or filtered, whatever. Like that's the best quality if you're going to buy it at the store.
Yeah, I think that's true. Here's an exciting thing. I don't want to leave people with the impression that, that they're doomed.
Right.
I really think that in the next 10 or 15 years, and again, it might be sooner than that because we seem to be in this exponential course of change these days.
Mhm.
It's really an exciting roller coaster ride, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, but I do see a situation where we may be able to decentralize some kind of treatment mechanism where treatment really means, like I said before, changing the vibratory patterns inside of water in a way that at the tap, if you will,
The source, right?
will be able to be revitalized. Victor Schauberger, a famous, water scientist, scholar in Germany in the 30s, 20s and 30s, talked about and built some machines back then that were intended to revitalize water.
Mm.
And so I think we've forgotten about that and we've taken the chemical approach to
Right,
things.
right, of
And
course.
I don't I don't think that that's ultimately going to bring us to where we want to be in the
Mhm.
same way. And I'm sorry to say this is controversial for some people that the pharmaceutical industry isn't probably exactly the right direction for us to attain the maximum level of health.
Mhm.
And by the way, what those two share is this notion of dealing chemically.
Right, right. Everybody listening here agrees with you, so you're in good company.
Well, I just, it's the old glass house thing. It's really
Sure.
easy because those folks have a big target on them and
Right, right.
side effects are pretty dramatic. And, you know, there's a lot of room for improvement. I do think the future, if I have a crystal ball, which, I've got to be a little careful of, is with changing our vibration. And I
Mhm.
literally mean that both in terms of the water we drink, but also the thoughts.
Mhm.
Remember something, and I'm going to let people know this for sure. Water is a transducer in our body. Okay. Without water, the electrical signals, which are key to life, are not able to be transmitted. And that's the process of aging. Right.
Right.
So when we solve that problem, then we will effectively be able to live a lot longer and we'll be able to live in a greater state of health. And I
Yeah.
think that's not far away. I
Yeah.
honestly mean that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I think, we talk about, I think there's some parts, like you were talking about Nikola Tesla with the vibration, the frequency, energy. I think there's some parts of that are easier for people to grasp when we talk about, because I had a guy, guest a while back, his episode hasn't come out yet, but talking about vibroacoustic therapy, right? We're talking about vibration and it's, similar thing. And I think for people, can get behind that. But I think people have a hard time grasping, like we're talking about water and so, but I think if we can really wrap our heads, because I totally agree with everything you're saying. And I think we don't think about food. Like food also has a vibration, right? And we talk about like food that comes from the earth, from the ground, is going to have a different vibration than the food that comes from a box or a bag, right? And I think it's harder for people to wrap that around because they can't feel, at least with the vibroacoustic thing, you can feel the vibration, right? But I think to your point, I think it's harder for people to wrap their head around this. And so yeah, the water thing, the vibration water, it's like out of sight, out of mind, because it's harder for people to grasp. But I agree with everything you're saying. I mean, it's just getting everybody on board with like, no, it's everything has a vibration, you know?
But let's think about this, okay? And people don't really address this very often. Every single one of our senses is vibratory in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say that again. Every single sense we have, including taste and smell, are vibratory in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When we come into a room and we look at a beautiful painting, that is a reflection, light's being reflected off of something, and
Mm-hmm.
that we see that, and that's translated vibratorily. When we
Yep.
eat a meal or we smell a flower or whatever, that's a vibratory
Mm-hmm.
sensation.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say to people who can't get their head around it, just think a little bit about those
Yeah.
statements and the truth and the reality of it.
Yeah.
And then you can sort of get on board with how important, for example, our thoughts are.
Mm-hmm.
You have a
100%.
beautiful thought, it gets translated through this water matrix that we have, and our cells are ecstatic as a result, and they vibrate harmoniously. We get into a stressful situation or we start having negative thoughts, and those negative thoughts are translated through our water in our body to our cells. And that, if it becomes a habit, becomes dis-ease.
Right.
We
Right.
make ourselves sick.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really not for me once I got on board. And of course, I fell into that same category before I really recognized, oh, yeah, now I get it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why water's so important. So you don't want to put water in your body that's been traumatized, right? Because that's not good for you. Now you can probably correct that, by the way, but if you don't have to, why would you?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. For sure. Well, and so I love this conversation, by the way, but as we start to wrap up, I would love to know kind of your practice with this, because I loved reading everything that came in the box, the water, and about, um, kind of tuning your water to the frequency that, so I would like to know just your personal practice when you're drinking this water and you're like programming the water. How do you practice this?
So what I do is, and like I said, I drink the water that we package in boxes, right? I
Mm-hmm.
have it on the countertop or in the refrigerator, and I just pour a glass out. And what I do is I have a thought, right? And so I'll give you a real world example. One of the things that I like to do is I like to channel divine love
Mm.
into my body. So what I do is I have this thought of having divine love, and then I say, I would like to fill my body with divine love. And then I say, I'd like to fill my heart with that divine love. And then I speak to the water. I'm holding a glass of water in my hands, and I say to the water, I love you, Michael. Or I say, I love you to my children, or I want to send that love to other people. And I speak that into that glass of water, and I feel that gratitude of being able to do that. and then I drink it. And if I want to send, for example, that love, that healing love, if you will, to a pain that I have in my wrist, I do that.
Mm-hmm.
If I want to change something about myself, if, for example, I want to have beautiful thoughts all the time, and then I say to the water, it is my intention that I have wonderful, beautiful thoughts at all times. And I drink that intention down. And what I found for me personally is over time that when I ask, I receive.
I love that. I love
Works.
that. Yeah,
I
yeah,
challenge people to do that. You don't have to do it just with our water.
sure.
I think other types of water can do it as well. Maybe it's that our water is one of the more receptive, we'll put it
Mm-hmm.
that way, okay,
Mm-hmm.
if there's a benefit to it. And so,
Yeah,
I just want people to have beautiful thoughts and realize and take responsibility for their own health, well-being, and longevity.
yeah, for sure. I love that. This is so good. Okay, so I have one more question that I want to ask you that I like to ask everybody as we finish. But can you let everybody know? I know we have a promo code and we have some good stuff for people. So can you share where people can find out how to order the water and all the things?
If people want to try it, I would suggest going to Aquene Springs, Aquene Springs.com. By the way, Aquene means it's a native word that means peace, tranquility, and clarity. Okay.
Oh, that's awesome. I
Yeah.
love
And
that.
we've got a code set up at checkout. If you put in hopeful with the number 10, after that at checkout, you'll get a 10% discount as well. And, just to let people know, and, our apologies for it, but water is heavy. We subsidize shipping, but it's really
Oh,
expensive to ship.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a
for sure.
premium, it's a kind of a luxury in some ways, but
Yeah,
it's really important. So,
yeah.
if you want to try, please feel free to do that.
Yeah, love it. And it comes in beautiful glass bottles. So that's
Those
why
come in
it's awesome.
bottles, but it
Yes.
also comes in 5-liter boxes and 5-gallon boxes as well
Oh,
as
nice.
economical way to buy it.
Oh, perfect. There you go. That's perfect. I love it. Okay, so all of that is going to be in the show notes. So y'all can go check it out. Use the promo code. If you're heavy metal detoxing, this is like extra bonus points because it's got the silica. So that's the other reason I love it. So, so good. Okay, so Michael, the last question I have to ask you that I like to ask everybody. What do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
I think it's to recognize that we're not here alone
Mm,
and that every day, if we walk in faith, and that means for whatever it's great for you as an individual, whatever that means. But if you walk in faith, then that's the best possible thing that you can do.
I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for this. And I'm excited for everybody. Y'all have to go try the water. I'm excited for everybody to try it. I love the mission that you have with this and what you're teaching us about our bodies and longevity and really the key to it. It's perfect. So thank you so much, Michael. This is so good.
My pleasure to be here, Hope.